blocking the background.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Tackle Talk Live. We're here at Fisherman's Landing in the conference room. We have a little bit of a project going on board the boat. That's why we're not there. It's our annual maintenance period. Regulatory stuff, Coast Guard, American Bureau of Shipping, FCC. We get our fire system certified again, and so the boat has got stuff laying around, and so that's why we're in the conference room. But in just about a month or so, we're going to be ready to rock, and so that's why we're in the conference room. We got some exciting news for everybody, and we're going to start fishing sooner this year. So we've got some spring trips coming up on the weekends in the spring. They're currently on the Fisherman's Landing website. We're going to do some ultra limited load trips, and they're on the weekends. They're 2.5 days, and they're priced reasonably, and they're going to be offshore. So there's still some bluefin tuna around, amazingly enough. We're so blessed to have that fishery right in our backyard. And so with 2.5 days, leaving on a Friday evening and fishing Saturday and Sunday and getting back on Monday morning, should be plenty of time to get where we need to go. There's signs of that bluefin all over the place. Just recently, probably 10 days ago or something like that, the guys on long trips just outside of San Martin Island there had giant schools of big bluefin tuna that didn't bite all that well, but stuck with the boat, and they had opportunities. So that fish is still around. It's just a little further south now, so we'll see what happens. But our goal is to have the boat ready to go, ready to fish April 1st. You'll notice that the trips start on the weekend of April 30th, but if there's fish around and there's people, we'll be starting sooner. So that's the good news, and we're going to talk bluefin tuna fishing today. And so we have some outfits, and we got some rigs that we can show you. So, any questions so far? No questions so far. So we got Armando with us, and he is going to be one of the captains this year. He ran the boat for us last year successfully, and so with Captain Mike Totter and Armando Marquez and myself, I'd say you got a pretty good chance of catching something. So we're happy to have Armando with us this afternoon, and he's going to show us a connection or two. So Armando, take it away.
All right, guys. I guess we'll start with a simple connection knot. You're going to be using a lot when you're fishing for bluefin tuna, the surgeon's knot. That's to match your monofilament to your fluorocarbon. And we've got these shoelaces here just to make it easier to show you guys this knot. You know, let's say that the white shoelace here is going to represent your mono and the blue is going to be your fluorocarbon. All you're going to do is take those two lines, match them together just like that. You're going to make a loop. Real easy, just like this. And then you're going to take your mono and your fluorocarbon and pass it through that loop 3 times. 1, 2, 3. You're going to take both of your tag ends on each side and get that knot nice and tight, just like that. Then you're just going to take your dikes and you clip the tag ends off from your mono and your fluoro. And that's a surgeon's knot. You're going to be using that quite a bit when you're fishing bluefin tuna, because we always recommend having a piece of fluorocarbon on when you're fishing live bait. whether or not it's for your sinker rig or just your fly line bait rig.
So how long is the fluorocarbon supposed to be, Armando? I know that if you put a 24 or a 30-inch piece of fluorocarbon, then I don't know, do you think that that's enough, or would you go longer than that, just so that you can use one piece of fluorocarbon multiple times?
I like to go anywhere from 4 to 5 feet. Most important thing when you're dealing with your connection knot there, you don't want it to actually pass through your guide. So you want it long enough to where you can tie multiple hooks on it in case you get broken off or you catch a fish and you want to retie, which you always should. Every time you put a fish on the deck, you should always retie your hook. So it's nice not to have to tie a new connection every time you got to retie your hook. But also, you don't want that knot passing through your guides when you're casting.
That's a great tip. So if you have a 7-foot rod and your reel is 18 inches above, then 5 feet would be probably the max that you would want to have, so that your fluorocarbon to mono connection is like maybe 8 to 12 inches below your tip, so that it doesn't affect your casting. That's what happens is if your connection goes through your guides, then maybe your cast isn't as effective. So that's a great tip. 4 to 5 feet, you get multiple uses out of the leader. It's more efficient because fluorocarbon's expensive. So if you're using a shorter piece, then you may have to retie a piece on and use that surgeon's loop. So if you make it a little bit longer so that it doesn't affect your cast, then you can use it for multiple times. There's tangles involved, and so there's sometimes we have to cut your hook off in order to save another person's fish. So when you retie, then that's using your fluorocarbon more efficiently.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk about, so that's for live bait and sinker rig, and then here's your Flatfall lure. And this is, I believe, 250 grams. So they're measured in grams as far as weight is concerned. And we recommend going with the heavier one. If it's a little windy or a little choppy and you're using 150 gram Flatfall, then it doesn't sink as fast and the boat's drifting at a quicker rate. So maybe you don't make it down to the bite zone. Maybe that could be as deep as 250 or 300 feet at times. So if you go with the 250 gram, then you're assured that you're going to get down there to that bite zone. And Armando or Mike or myself we'll be in the bridge when we stop on fish, and we can tell you what depth those fish are at. And then here's another key thing for your Flatfall is this heavy monofilament leader. Now this is probably 30 inches long. You could go a little bit longer than that because Bluefin tuna, once they get to be 50 or 60 pounds, then their teeth get bigger. So as the fish gets bigger, their teeth get bigger. And so if you're tying 60 pound on your Flatfall lure, then if that fish, consumes this lure and it's deep in its mouth, then with 60 pound, you have a chance of abrasion and you lose the fish because you got bit off. Whereas if you have this, I think this is 400 pound mono, and we're using 200 to 400 pound mono leader material for this, then you take that abrasive part out of the equation, and so you're gonna have a better chance of landing your fish. So that's the Flatfall lure. Colors, there's multiple colors out there, And obviously, if you got one that's worked in the past, then you want to duplicate that and have a few in your tackle box. A question?
How much mono before the leader?
How much mono before the fluorocarbon top shot or the
Leader.
for the lure? So I guess for me, I'm putting a top shot of mono on there because I'm a little older and not as tough as I used to be. So I like a little stretch, and monofilament provides that. So if you put, 100 feet of monofilament, so you have your braided line, whichever braid you use, 100 feet of mono, and then this leader, then you have a little bit of stretch. If you're young and tough like Armando, then you could tie your braid right straight to the leader on your flatfall lure, but you're gonna feel every time that fish moves its tail, you're gonna feel it, and I don't like that. So I like a little stretch, a little top shot. And that goes for live bait fishing, sinker fishing. We recommend a top shot of at least 100 feet, and then whatever other method, fluorocarbon to a live bait leader, or you're using mono and your sinker rig with fluorocarbon too. Go ahead.
Do you ever use flatfalls for other fish species?
Absolutely. We've seen yellowfin tuna landed on flatfall lures, and we've seen yellowtail deep on kelp patties. And I know that if you go too deep and we're in the shallows, then rockfish bite these things too. So we're going to be offshore in deep water, looking for that bluefin tuna and yellowtail. And in the spring, the likelihood historically of yellowfin tuna being around in the spring isn't too high. So, yellowfin typically show up a little bit later when the water warms up a little bit. But bluefin's a cold water fish, and they're around right now. I saw some information the other day that the water was 63 to 65 degrees where they were catching the fish.
So we have a question about lines that you see on the fish after they land on deck. What are those from?
Armando?
The marks on the fish is generally from your line, rubbing against that fish, just as you're fighting it.
Or somebody else's line.
Somebody else's line if you're wrapped up with someone else.
Yeah. Or somebody else hooked that fish and lost it, and the marks could be from somebody else's line. But yeah, the fish is running away from the boat, and so the line is the hook is in the corner of its mouth, so it runs back behind the fish, and so that line actually puts a mark on the fish's skin.
Will you have the Kite set up for spring trips?
Absolutely, yeah. We have a little starter kit of flying fish left over from last year, so we have some frozen flyers. And so absolutely, there are times when that's the only way you get a bite is with a Kite. And so, and it's all dependent upon conditions. I mean, if it's like a lake out there and there's no wind, then we can't get a Kite up. So that is problematic, but be careful what you wish for. I mean, we'll take the flat calm weather and struggle with the Kite a little bit, but we will have it available. We have Kite rods and reels available for you to use, and or if you want to bring your own outfit for a kite outfit, then you can do that too. Just make sure that you have, you know, the heaviest outfit possible. I have here's a 7-foot graphite rod. This is a CalStar 770XH, and here's a Talica 25 Shimano with 80-pound 2-speed. So you could use this as a kite outfit, and that would work. And if you needed a kite leader or something like that, you can talk to the crew. This is a great outfit, 7 foot. It's got the extended hypalon on it, so it's a rail rod. And I wouldn't have any problems using this as a kite outfit. It's a quality outfit. This is from Fisherman's Landing. This is their rental gear that they have. And so if you don't have an outfit of that size, then we strongly recommend that you have an 80-pound 2-speed big outfit. And because you're going to use that at night or during the day if there's fish, schools of fish laying with the boat, and you want to try a flatfall, then you got to have one of those 2-speed big reels with 80 or 100-pound test on it.
Question for Armando. Do you ever fish barbless to give yourself more of a challenge?
It's not something that we would normally practice out there, just because we're trying to land, especially if we're bluefin tuna fishing, we're trying to land those big fish. So barbless hooks, it's not something that we normally do. I've done it trout fishing, but not normally out there.
On flatfall type jigs, do you prefer the dual hooks off the tail, off the nose, or both?
You can do it off both, off the tail. I mean, generally just the setup that Art has right there works just fine. But you know, they make those chandelier rigs right now where you have 2 hooks hanging off the top, 2 hooks down below, or a single big J hook down below. It all works. You know, if you do buy a flatfall and the hooks seem a little small to you, maybe check with the crew, because we have found some of the factory ones that we were actually changing the hooks just to make them a little bit bigger, to make sure we have a better success rate at landing those bluefin on them.
Is a Talica 16 significant for a heavy setup as long as you have the right line size?
Talica 16.
Or sorry, TAC 16, my bad.
TAC?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with a TAC. What's a TAC? Is that a... Talica 16 would work. You know, I brought a Penn Fathom 40 that you could have, you know, 60-pound for live bait fishing. So a Talica 16 would be, you know, something that you could have 60-pound top shot on with 60-pound fluorocarbon, and that would work for fly lining a bait when we're drifting. But nothing less than 60 pound. I mean, you know, you have a chance of catching a fish of a lifetime, and there's some really big bluefin tuna out there. So if you're undergunned with trying to fish 40 or 50 pound tests just to get a bite, you're wasting your time, because you're just not going to land a fish that size.
Fly a fish for 2 hours.
Yeah, and have it
break off.
bite you off. So, you know, that's one thing about, you know, the whole barbless thing. I mean, that we're taking you out there, and you have a chance to catch. Absolutely, you have a chance of catching a fish of a lifetime. I mean, it's not every day that you can go out on a 2.5 day trip and have a chance at a 200 to 300 pound bluefin tuna. I mean, I don't think did we get a 300 pounder this year? We did, yeah. So they're out there. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that there's 400 pound plus fish out there that you see them boil on the kite or jump or whatever, and you just know that thing was a 400 pounder, and you might be maybe grateful that you didn't hook it.
Do you recommend changing a treble hook to a single hook?
Treble hooks are generally smaller in size, and definitely if you have a treble hook on a lure and you're fishing for tuna, then we would recommend a single hook. You want to do a sinker rig, Armando? Should we use the heavier shoelace there to
Yeah, I mean,
show how that works?
you just don't have a rubber band.
Oh, we'll be right back. Rubber band, yeah. Rubber band is key, right?
But I mean, it's definitely just the same thing. And the cool thing about rubber band sinker rig fishing is that you really don't have to change your setup from what you have for your fly line, because you're tying your surgeon's knot like we went over earlier. 1, 2, 3. Your fluoro to your mono connection there. And what you want to do is just take your rubber band and run it through your sinker, right there like that. Take that, run it back all the way over so it's just looped like that. A lot of times guys will have it wrapped around their sinker all the way around their line, and the problem with that is that what happens is once your fish comes to the boat, if you have your sinker wrapped all the way around, we have to get that sinker off your line in order for us to land that fish. So it takes us a lot longer if that rubber band's wrapped all the way around your line for us to get our dikes out and try to cut it out, and there's more of a chance of us actually cutting your line. So if you just take your sinker, wrap it around above your knot on your mono just one time, so it's just looped around and hanging, and your knot will keep it from sliding down to the end where your hook's going to be. So as I was saying, when it comes up to color there, or we see your weight, it's so much easier for us to just grab your line, grab the dikes, and cut that weight off, so that rubber band and the weight doesn't get up to your guide and interrupt us landing your fish. So.
And sometimes that sinker will actually slide up the line if it's rigged that way. Now, some people say, well, sinkers are expensive, so if I do it like that, then there's a chance I'm going to lose my sinker every time I go down. So I guess you want heavier rubber band?
Yeah, and make sure that you're always checking your rubber bands, because you might have a bag of rubber bands from last year and they've just been sitting in the garage somewhere, and that thing is so brittle. So really try to stretch it out, make sure that thing's not going to break before you use it. We find that all the time when we're grabbing rubber bands. We're always checking them to make sure they're not brittle and going to break.
So you can buy different size rubber bands, different thickness and everything. So I know the ones that we use, the cooks save the rubber bands off of the asparagus or the broccoli or something like that, and they're pretty wide and they're pretty strong, and they work really well.
Yeah, it makes it a little more difficult to get it through the eye, but once you get it through there, I mean, it's a lot nicer to have a heavier, stronger rubber band when you're fishing. But I mean, if you lost your sinker to catch a 200-pound bluefin, I think it's worth it.
Darn, worth the investment, yeah.
Do you have a suggestion for matching hook size to bait size?
Yeah, generally, when you're fishing larger sardines, which throughout the year we are definitely getting different size bait. It's kind of a difficult one sometimes, just because sometimes the smaller hooks are getting bit better. But you definitely do want to match your hook size to your bait the majority of the time, and that's something that goes with once you get on the boat. We're gonna need to see what kind of bait we get that day, and then once we see what kind of bait, the crew, when they do their seminars with you, they will definitely be able to, we'll fill you in and let you know what size hook we recommend, or we might know prior, so when you get on the boat, we'll let you know if you don't have tackle. And we always have tackle on the boat as well, if you guys don't have the proper hook size.
One thing to follow up with that is, you know, if you're using 50-pound test and a 1/0 hook, circle hooks, don't forget that, circle hooks are important. And you're having trouble getting a bite. And so you might say to yourself, okay, well, I'm not getting a bite, I'm gonna go down to 40-pound and a smaller hook. Well, our recommendation would be just go down in hook size. Don't go down in line class. Go down in hook size. So if you have a 1/0 circle hook, then maybe you go down to a number 1 circle hook. And so your bait presentation changes a little bit, and maybe you have success getting a bite. Now, we see that with, you know, last year on Tanner Bank, we had those 40 to 60 pounders, and those bluefin tuna definitely a smaller hook size, regardless of what the bait size was, smaller hook size seemed to get the bit better than the larger hook size. So that's another tip, is don't go down in line class and risk losing your fish because your line wasn't heavy enough. Go down just 1 hook size and maybe you get a bite on the heavier line, and so you have a better chance of catching your fish.
How about reviewing the line sizes they should have when they come aboard to fish bluefin?
Well, you know, I would say you want 40 to 80 pound test minimum, depending upon, you know, if we find a big breezer or a flat spot or a school of fish on top and it's all the 100 to 200 pounders, then you want that 80 pound test so that you, if you get a bite, you have an opportunity to land the fish. But then, you know, there can be mixed size fish. There can be schools of 40 to 60 pounders, and then in the same area there can be those bigger ones. And so if we come up on a school of 40-pound fish, then you could use that lighter tackle and still have a chance to catch a fish. So you want at least, you want 40, 50, 60, and 80. And I would definitely have 2-speed reels if you can. And you know, these 10 fathoms are, you know, we have those as our boat rods for loaner tackle, and they're you know, reasonable as far as 2 speeds are concerned, and they're workhorses. I mean, we put them through the ringer, and they catch a lot of fish, and they're a good investment. So if you don't have a 2-speed reel, then invest some money on a 2-speed.
And a question for Armando. Is a beard generally required to be a professional fisherman?
Is that his wife?
Sounds like it. I just had a beard a lot. I don't know. I just always had it.
How about, we had a question about what are some common newbie mistakes to avoid when you go on a long range trip?
Common newbie mistakes. Kind of like what Art said, is trying not to fish with line that's too light. I think a big thing that happens on the boat is that we'll have people that sometimes forget to change their line, or just assume that their line that's on their reels from maybe last trip is still good. So I think that is a really big thing, is making sure, especially if you're going out for these larger bluefin, is that you have fresh line, fresh mono. Definitely a a top shot of mono was a big thing. A lot of people want to fish that straight braid to just a fluorocarbon leader, and it goes into kind of what we were talking about with the surgeon's knot. If you're trying to tie every time you need, like you caught 3 fish or you got broken off 3 times and you need to tie a new leader, it takes a lot longer to tie spectra to your fluoro than it does to tie mono to your fluoro. So I think that's a big deal, is trying not to fish that straight braid to fluoro every time until you're very, very skilled with the knot tying. Sometimes it takes a little while.
Does fluorocarbon degrade sitting in your tackle box?
Yeah, I mean over time, but as long as it's in a cool place, you know, I don't know, depending on where you store it.
Do you have to replace it each year?
The fluoro, yeah, I definitely would. I wouldn't be fishing with the same spool of fluoro from last season.
Can you give us some tips about how to choose the best bait, how to handle it, how to hook it, how to get it into the water?
Oh yeah, bait selection is definitely one of the key things when you're fishing any fish, you know. But especially with bluefin, because they can be so finicky. And bait selection, you know, when you go up to the hand well, you're obviously looking for that bait that is nice and lively. It doesn't have the red nose. It's swimming really well. You can't catch it. That's the one you want. One that you can't catch. But handling that bait is also a big key, because if you grab that bait and squeeze it, you take all of its scales off and it's not going to swim that well. So it's about corralling it very gently into the corner of the hand well, grabbing it, hooking it on right away, and immediately grabbing your line above the bait. Don't hold on to it once you get it on your hook, because the more you handle it, the more scales you take off, and it's not going to swim all that well once you get it in the water. And once it's in the water, if that bait doesn't start swimming right away, it's pretty much time to change it real quick. You'll see us fishing, and within 10 seconds of sending a bait out, we'll change it, because you can tell right away whether or not it's going to swim well.
Braid. Do you prefer hollow or solid braid?
Definitely solid braid. I mean, that's just for your connection knot. When you're dealing with hollow, then you're actually taking a needle and threading it up into the braid, and it just takes a lot longer to tie that connection. The solid braid, definitely, it's a lot easier to tie, and as long as your connection knot is good, then it works amazingly.
How are we doing on time?
We're good.
One thing we want to mention is, so there is a Facebook Live CCA meeting directly after. In 2 weeks, we're going to do this again, and we're really lucky to have Steve Carson from Penn University and Penn Reels is going to be here to talk about, the 5 outfits that you want to make sure and not leave at home. So he's going to cover all that. And Steve is a great guy and an excellent fisherman, and has been a great supporter of Team Searcher and over the years, and so we're lucky to have him in 2 weeks at the same time.
And one more question that's pertinent for lady anglers. Rod belts. Do you suggest rod belts, and do you recommend that passengers bring their own because they're sized to them, or do we supply all sizes on the boat?
The one issue we do have with rod belts sometimes is that people want to get them, they hook a fish and they want to get their rod immediately in their belt before they start winding and getting that line tight and that hook set. So we actually do see a lot of fish lost in the process of between getting the bite and getting it into the rod belt. But once you get that fish hooked and lines tight and you're winding on it and fighting it, that's when you want to take the time to get it into your belt. we fish a lot of this big bluefin on rail rods, so we tend to have a lot more success with that. But that's up to you. You know, if you want to have a belt and you feel more comfortable with it, then for sure you should definitely bring a belt. We have a few on the boat, so I mean we do have them. But yeah, nothing wrong with them.
I would definitely, you know, it's pretty reasonable investment to get your own rod belt, and then you can pick the one that fits you the best and you're most comfortable with, and so that would be you know, a pretty reasonable investment to have your own rod belt. It's already set up to your size and everything, and invariably, how many times do you have a rod belt? Oh yeah, it's over on my tackle box over there. You know,
Can you rather than get my rod
yeah,
belt?
will you get my rod belt for me? So it might be, you know, if you invest in a rod belt, then when you get up in the morning, put your rod belt on. So if you hook the fish, then you have it at your disposal.
Few more questions coming in. On a long soak situation, how long should you let the bait stay out there before changing it?
Well, you know, we're geared to, you know, 3 or 4 minutes. I guess it could be longer than that if, you know, you're keeping track of your bait and you feel that bait on the end of your line and it's still swimming. I know that we've had people soak it for 6 or 8 minutes. So it's really a long ways out there, and sometimes that can be an effective way of getting a bite if you get it way out there away from the boat. And hopefully it's one of those situations where we have a nice school of fish and we've been drifting for a while, so you have the opportunity to get it out there for 6 or 8 minutes. It's just think about, you know, you have this small sardine that's got a hook through its nose, and then it's dragging around all that line that you have out there. So the longer it's out there, the weaker it is. And so, you know, maybe 6 or 7 minutes might be the longest. We recommend that, you know, 2 to 4 minutes I'm winding in and I'm putting a new bait on. So that way you get a live fresh bait from the hand well.
What size setup for poppers and Colt snipers do you recommend?
Well, for those, you know, if we're fishing that bigger bluefin, I definitely wouldn't fish anything less than 50 pound, you know, depending on the size of the fish. Usually when you're fishing any type of jig, you want heavier line, because the jig is getting the bite for you. Not like a bait where sometimes you have to drop down in line size to get a bite. So nothing less than 50 pound on those poppers or Colt snipers.
When bluefin fishing with a finicky bite, what's your go-to tactic? Drop down line sizes, try different lures.
Well, it kind of goes back to what Art was talking about earlier, is that one of the first things you want to try is definitely drop hook size before you drop line size. If you're noticing that a lot of people aren't getting any bites on the fly line, I like to immediately go and try that sinker rig, because sometimes those fish only want to bite down below. I mean, depending on like the size of the fish that we're fishing, sometimes dropping down line size works, but if we're fishing that big bluefin, then definitely start with the dropping hook size before you drop line size. But you just want to choose the best bait you possibly can in a finicky bite before you start dropping down to that lighter gear just to get a bite. Because if you get a bite on the light gear, then you just pull on that fish for a while, and then most of the time you're going to end up losing it.
How do you match your fluorocarbon to your spectra line?
Knot wise, I generally will just tie an Albright. That's the easiest knot to tie. I mean, it's kind of hard to show with these, but just so you have a general idea. if this is your line here, you're gonna make your loop to your mono there, and then you're gonna take your fluoro and you're gonna run through that loop, keeping your fingers pinching where that loop's at, and then you're gonna run your line down both of these lines on that mono. You know, you want to do it about 6 or 7 times down and then 6 or 7 times back up. You know, with
And
this.
that's on braid, right?
Yeah,
The question was braid?
Yeah, to braid.
Okay.
So, and then you just would come back up after you went down 6 or 7 times. And kind of the key is to always make sure that you're keeping those loops in between each other as you're coming back up, like that. And then you're going to come right back once you get back up the same way through that loop, that initial loop that you went through. And then you just start cinching it down. Obviously, it doesn't do it as well with the shoelace, but you want to make sure once you get up here that you're real tight on top of that loop where you're going through there, and then cinch it all the way down. And it's really important once you get that knot up there that it looks real clean. It's not all clumped up. It's all bright if you want to look it up and see how to tie it. I think we definitely have some tackle tips on that.
Can you tie hollow to mono as if it was solid braid?
Yeah, definitely can. We've actually do that quite a bit on our kite setups, because a lot of our kite setups have hollow braid, and rather than taking the needle and threading it up and doing that, we will just tie an albright, you know, a couple other different knots you could tie. Tony Pena is one of them, and yeah, we tie it just like it's solid regular braid.
What's the best reel for kite fishing for big bluefin? We're getting lots of questions now.
We use that accurate.
The best, well, we have a variety. We have Pan Internationals, 50 wide, I believe. And then we have an Accurate twin drag. Those are good. Talica from Shimano is a great kite reel. It's just the heaviest outfit that you have with a 2-speed, because you definitely want to make sure that you have the heaviest outfit possible so that you can have a chance of landing the fish. So there's several manufacturers out there. Okuma, what's another one?
Yeah, I have that Okuma Makaira 30 that works really well.
Makaira, right, yeah. So, I guess it depends, a little depends on your budget too. You know, if you want the Ferrari, then you're gonna get an Accurate or a Talica. And if you want the Ford F-150, then you're gonna get a Pan International, or we have the 60 Fathom, would be kind of a little bit of a stretch, but you could use a 60 Fathom Pan 2-speed. And
Tiagra, we have one of those we use as well.
Tiagra, Shimano Tiagra is a great kite reel, yeah, 2-speed.
So a question about late afternoon, early evening fishing big bluefin. Should you generally use a next larger setup to be ready for a potential larger class of fish coming through?
Not necessarily. You know, time of day really isn't a factor. I mean, it's one of those things that, you know, when the fish are up and showing themselves, then, you know, that can happen at any time of the day. You know, nighttime fishing at, you know, sunset and just after sunset, you know, then we're fishing with heavy tackle and flatfall lures and sinker rigs, because the fish are deeper, they're not on the surface. And sometimes, you know, we're up at 3 o'clock in the morning driving around trying to find a school before daylight that we can hopefully get established in. And, you know, once again, that's deeper flatfall and sinker rigs, whereas during the day we're seeing fish closer to the surface. So time of day makes a difference on what method you use, but that's kind of how we've had success in the past.
So someone who's 7 wants to know how old you have to be to come on the boat.
Well, we recommend that, you know, if you're coming out by yourself, that 10 to 12 years old. And, you know, we've certainly had 7 or 8 year olds on day-and-a-half trips. And so, you know, if you've been out on a half-day fishing trip or a 3/4 day and you want to go a little bit longer, then we'd be happy to have a 7-year-old come out. Absolutely.
Should we be bringing surface iron gear?
You know, there are times when we catch fish on the surface iron, but it's you know, if it's up foamers, you know, there have been fish caught on surface iron, and so, you know, if you're bringing a surface iron, then, you know, you want 7X or Tatty 45, something like that. And you want to be fishing with 50-pound, and maybe you could put a heavier leader on the surface iron, just like having a heavy leader on your flatfall lure. And then Colt snipers are really effective. I mean, it's not really a surface type lure, but it's an artificial lure that you should have in your tackle box that will give you another weapon in your arsenal.
Armando, what's your favorite length of trip and why? Or maybe your favorite kind of fishing?
It's kind of a tough one. It's all a lot of fun. I mean, I love the fishing this big bluefin up here. Down at the ridge, that's always fun. Wahoo fishing. It's all amazing. Fun either way.
What do you think about moon phases and its effect on bluefin fishing? New moon, full moon?
I don't know. It seems like sometimes they'll bite in a full moon. Sometimes they won't. You know, I know a lot of people have different theories. So I haven't really figured that one out quite yet. There's such a finicky fish sometimes that there's sometimes, you know, in that full moon they want to definitely bite in the dark, and there's times when, you know, it just doesn't happen that way.
So can you show the way to tie a dropper loop? Somebody's interested in fishing for big yellows at Alejos Rocks.
Okay, yeah.
Dropper loop. Well,
Oops.
you can, so you have your line from your rod and reel, and this is going to your sinker, and so you can take and you're going to make 3 or 4 twists with this shoelace, but it would be 6 or 7 twists with 80-pound test, and then you're going to take your loop and you're going to go up between the 2 sets of twists, and then you're going to cinch that by pulling on either side. Now this isn't the right size loop because of the size line that we have, but you want to have your loop should be, you know, 12 to 18 inches long at the finished product. And you can tie a surgeon's loop too. So that would be just a plug knot, and then you can tie a surgeon's loop. So you make your loop, and you can go once, twice, 3 times, and cinch that down. Here's your loop, here's your line going to your sinker, and here's the line going to your reel. So surgeon's loop works.
Logan's gonna fish for a big yellow at Alejos this year.
Okay, Logan.
Question about Guadalupe. Will we be fishing there this year?
Well, we have a permit, a valid permit, and we have not been notified whether or not the reserve is going to be open yet. Last year they closed it for public health reasons. It was a decision made by the health department in Ensenada. They closed the reserve, and so we didn't have access to it. So we're hopeful that everybody gets a vaccine, and maybe this fall we'll get the okay to go out there. Another issue was the port of Ensenada was closed, so without being able to go there and clear in and out of that port, then because of the virus, we couldn't access it last year. So we're hopeful. We have the paperwork. It's just a case of whether or not the reserve is open and whether the port of Ensenada is open. So to be determined.
How do we sign up for one of those spring trips you were talking about?
You can book through fishermanslanding.com. Go to their website and you can search Searcher, and those trips are up and available now, and you can book online. You could call Celia or Callie in the Searcher office, 619-226-243, or go on our website, searchersportfishing.com, and they can refer you to fishermanslanding.com and get all the info on those things. So we're excited. We're, generally we don't fish until the end of June, but with the virus, we're not going to be doing natural history trips this year, so we're going to start fishing sooner, and we're fired up for it. So we want to thank everybody. Just another shout out to CCA California at 5 o'clock live on Facebook. You can check out their meeting. They have great info about issues with sport fishing, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thanks, guys. Look forward to seeing you here soon.